How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at Tales from the Darkside Season 3. We're going to be doing a season overview. This is, of course, the Anthology Horror Show created by horror icon George A. Romero, and Season 3 went for 22 episodes, so 2 less than last time, not much, but still noticeable, and ran from September 28th, 1986, all the way to May 17th, 1987. And I guess I should start off by saying that I do believe the seasons of Darkside are slightly different each time. Not a huge thing to notice. I mean, Darkside stays pretty consistent, but I do think the seasons are a little different. Season 1 was a lot lower budget, and it had a constant theme of people who had been beaten down by the world in telling their stories. A lot of older, crankier people in Season 1. Season 2 had a little bit more of a budget, and it wasn't quite as cranky. Also, for whatever reason, we got a few more sci-fi episodes that time around. Maybe it's because of the budget increase. So Season 2 is slightly higher quality. Season 3, though, it's still good. It still is Darkside, and I still, for the most part, liked it. But sadly, I think Season 3 was a little more hit and miss, you know? And it may be that they rushed it out a little too fast. I don't know. But I feel like when looking at them as an overview, I think a little less than half of them are good to classic episodes, you know? There are some absolute highlights this season. There are some absolute classic episodes. But it's not like all of them are perfect, obviously. But I think a little less than half of them fall into that good to perfect range. And a large chunk from the middle are just fine episodes. They almost kind of feel like halfway decent filler episodes. You know, tropey things that we've seen before. They're not bad. It's just a lot of these episodes are in the so-so category. And then we do have a few more bad apples than normal. Usually it seems like there were only 1 or 2 really bad ones. There's a few more than that. I'm going to be talking about 4 of them. But yeah, it just seemed like there were a few more stinkers this time around. So again, I don't want to say it's a bad season. It's just not quite as good, and the likelihood of an episode being meh to bad is more likely. And I don't know exactly what that is, like what contributed to it. I did notice that this time around it seemed like we were getting less adaptations. Season 1 and 2 of Darkside, it was actually kind of rare to get an episode that originated purely from a script. A lot of the episodes were borrowing from short horror stories or short sci-fi stories that you'd find in a collection or a magazine, and adapting from a pre-existing source material. That really does help, you know, having more of a foundation to build upon. And this time around, we were getting less stuff adapted. Another sign that this may have been cranked out a little bit fast, Edith Winston actually wrote 5 of the episodes. So about a quarter of this season was written by one person. I kind of feel that maybe the writing phase went a little too quick here. I don't know. Poor Edith having to write so much. But again, it's not a bad season. It's just, I feel like it's more hit and miss than the others. But, you know, first things first, celebrating the bright spots, let's talk about this season's highlights. First off, George Romero. We actually get 2 episodes written by George Romero. In the last 2 seasons, we only had 1 episode apiece written by him. Here we have 2. Although that being said, I don't think Season 4 has any, so it does average out, but whatever. 2 George Romero episodes. First, The Circus, which I believe is the first episode of the season, and it's an absolutely classic episode. George Romero's The Circus, This reporter goes to a strange circus in the middle of nowhere in order to debunk their sideshow acts. But of course, all the classic monsters he has there are gonna be a little too realistic. And I do mean classic monsters. This vampire in a cage from the front cover, that's from this episode. And we also get other things, like a Frankenstein monster even is in this episode. It's a really fun Monster Mash episode, and a great way to open the season. Later in the season, George Romero would also write Baker's Dozen, which isn't as good as The Circus, but is still a fun, classic anthology horror story. A woman is making a cookie shop with voodoo spells inside of her cookies. So, magic cookies, that's pretty crazy. But we get a ton of classic backstabbing and betrayal, a really good example of anthology horror tropes, and I really do like how most of the characters in here, there aren't really good guys. They have their own angles and their own ways to want to kind of betray each other. And Baker's Dozen is pretty fun. Another person, Robert Bloch. Robert Bloch, you may know as the guy who wrote Psycho. One of his short stories is adapted here, and that is Everybody Needs a Little Love. And this is about two down-on-their-luck guys, very Season 1 characters, and one of them, his wife has left him. As a prank, they steal a mannequin from this guy's, the store that he works at, but the guy starts to live with the mannequin a little too long and starts to talk like it's real. But of course, this is a horror short. Maybe the mannequin is real. A very strange little story, and a lot to think about with that one. I guess, moving on, what is probably the most famous episode from this season would have to be the Christmas episode, and this one's entitled Seasons of Belief. In this episode, you get some parents telling an obviously fake, scary story to their kids. You know, the Grither. It's this mysterious figure that lives up at the North Pole, and it's a horror creature. And this story is going to spook the young kids. It's a really good classic episode, especially because most of it is just told through dialogue, and you don't actually see too many fanciful things, and the way that they were able to pull off a very engaging bottle episode by just talking, it's super impressive, but you really do get into this unique character and all of its lore. Definitely check out Seasons of Belief. I think that's a really good one. Another interesting one, My Ghost Rider the Vampire, is actually a DC Comics adaptation. Yeah, DC put out a bunch of anthology horror back in the day. You know, cool old books kind of in the vein of Tales from the Crypt. And this is an adaptation of one of those stories. And this one, you get a writer who's not a great writer. And the previous assistant who had been basically telling him all the vampire lore, that assistant quits, but luckily for him, a real vampire shows up, and in exchange for food and shelter, the vampire is going to give the writer all of his stories. That's a fun anthology horror setup, you know, a classic creature with an interesting twist, you know, and a story about a writer secretly writing the truth. One more that I want to mention, the Giesenstacks. I'm a sucker for a creepy doll story, and in this one, this kid gets a house, a little doll house full of dolls, and the members of the doll family parallel the members of the real family, and she starts doing little stories with them, which start to mirror real-life events that happen to the family. What's going on, kid? How are you predicting the future? And a really fun, wacky twist ending to this one. I really did like the Giesenstacks. And I think there are a few other pretty good ones in here. If I didn't mention your favorite, let me know. I think people might like episodes like Black Widow's Enormous Radio or The Milkman Cometh. I think there are a few more good ones. I can't list them all. At the end of the video, the Darkside playlist should pop up. And if you want to see me talk about any specific Season 3 episode, you should be able to find that there. But let's move on to the bad episodes for this season. And we're going to be talking about 4 of them. I almost just cut it off at 3, but I'm like, okay, let's talk about the 4th one as well. The bad episodes. The Social Climber. This one was frustrating. It's one of those where magic just doesn't make much sense. You get a shoemaker's assistant who has a pretty decent life, but he's fed up with it, and he wants something better. And the shoemaker boss starts to scold him for this, but it turns out he's making special shoes in the back using magic to make people's lives better, which instantly makes him a huge hypocrite. But it also sounds like these shoes are kind of tied to people's pre-existing fates, and the shoemaker himself doesn't even really know what these are, and then what's the point of having magic shoes? Yeah, I don't know. And plus the idea when the assistant finds them and transforms into other people's lives. This is a bottle episode. We can't show none of that. So the meat of this episode is off camera. Social Climber's bad. Another bad one is My Own Place, where this guy is getting his own apartment by himself for the first time ever, and whenever he's alone, an Indian man pops up, Ram. He's from India, and he says it was so crowded that his soul just got squeezed out and popped into New York. Okay, that's kind of weird, but Ram will start haunting him whenever he's alone, and it's one of those appreciate the good life that you have episodes, right? The only problem is this guy did appreciate his good life. He talked about how he had to work really hard to get what he had. He had a girlfriend who really loved him, and he's not a bad guy. I don't know why he's being punished, you know? He says he doesn't own the bank. He just works at the bank, and he's trying to make the best of his career that he can, and he's already this old and he's never had his own place before. It's like, this guy is just an average, everyday hard worker. This episode would make sense if it was like the boss of the bank instead, and he had personally screwed over the people in India, but it's not. It's just some average guy getting punished for no real reason. So yeah, My Own Place, another bad episode. Third bad one, The Bitterest Pill. The Bitterest Pill is quite simply one of those, I'm gonna be a wacky character, isn't this entertaining? No, it's not. Basically, this guy, he invents a pill to make himself smarter, and then he goes to see one of his estranged friends to try to get funding from him. And yes, even though he says, I'm so smart, I remember everything, my brain's perfect, he's still going to pull wacky antics that he really shouldn't if his brain is as evolved as he says it is. So contradicting himself right off the bat, plus if he's so smart, why does he even need funding from this guy? But all that aside, it's just a guy running around being silly, and it does not hold up. It is just bad old comedy at its finest, and yeah, wasn't really a fan of this one either. And I guess one more I should mention, it's not as bad as the others, but I gotta do a shout out to A Serpent's Tooth. A mom and all her little warnings start to come true when she gets a magical serpent's tooth, i.e., don't read so much you'll go blind, serpent's tooth, boom, wishes in effect, Mom, I'm blind. It's an okay concept. The only problem is she is so terrible at using it. she doesn't realize that any little idiom or term that she says could happen. And so she just starts spouting off things while still wearing her magic charm, wreaking havoc. And the thing, though, is quite early on in this episode, they established that you can simply say the opposite to reverse it, and she doesn't even think to do that. Careful what you say. You don't have to wear the necklace forever. If you get in a bad spot, just say the opposite. But the magic here is so underutilized, and the person wielding it is so stupid at testing, analyzing, and figuring it out. Granted, it's mostly played for comedy, and again, a lot of the more extravagant things are told to us and not showed. It's just one of those that I was flipping through the episodes for this season, doing my best to remember them, and I saw that one and I'm like, oh gosh, I remember that one. So, as I said, Darkside Season 3, bit of hits, bit of misses. Yeah, it's not as good as the other seasons, but I still say, on average, the episodes are fine, and a lot of them are those okay filler episodes. And okay isn't bad, right? So I do want to say, you know, when I covered this show, you guys, if you're watching these when they came out, you may notice that there were a few weeks in there where I didn't cover an episode, and that was because it was a little harder to get on fire for these episodes this time around, and the bad episodes were kind of keeping me down this season. But I did get through them all, and I do think, on average, the season's still okay. But yeah, Season 3 is not my favorite. Season 4 is the last one, and I am curious how that season's gonna go. Hopefully it will be a bit of a step up. But yeah, I gotta cover all of Season 4 and the movie, so that should be fun. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Tales from the Darkside playlist, and in there you should be able to find overviews for Season 1 and 2 as well as my individual episode reviews for every single episode this season. So yes, this playlist is long. I also covered the Joe Hill comic and Clive Barker's episode early, so big Darkside playlist on the bottom. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.